These are humans. You got to listen to them. Medicine has advanced quite rapidly, but the human aspect, we are losing it out. We know the medicine, we can do the surgery, robotic, the high technology. There's no substitute for the human aspect.
Welcome to the Humans in Healthcare podcast, where we highlight stories in healthcare that impact clinical teams, connect people, and transform lives. I'm your host, Nathan King, and on today's episode, I interviewed Dr. Arun Singh, prolific cardiac surgeon at Rhode Island Hospital and author of the memoir, Your Heart, My Hands. Arun was born in India in 1944 and is one of the most preeminent heart surgeons in the U.S. He has performed over 15,000 open heart surgeries on babies and adults, and nearly 5,000 other related procedures. Arun was trained in surgery at Columbia University, Brown University Medical School, and Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children in London. Arun has practiced at Rhode Island Hospital since 1975 and helped to build a nationally recognized cardiac surgery program there. He also was a professor of surgery at Brown University's Alpert Medical School starting in 1991 and has been an emeritus since 2016. Additionally, he is an adjunct professor at Bryant University's Physician Assistant Program. He is a fellow of the American College of Surgeons, the American College of Cardiology, American Heart Association, and the Royal College of Surgeons. He is also a member of the Society of Thoracic Surgeons and the American Association of Thoracic Surgery, among others. Arun is the author of his memoir entitled Your Heart, My Hands, which was published in April 2019 and went on to win a variety of national book awards. On today's episode, Arun shares about his experience as an Indian immigrant in the U.S. during the 1960s, the obstacles he overcame to pursue a career in surgery, the importance of emotion in the medical field, and how to develop a deeper understanding of the human heart. I learned a lot talking to Arun about his incredible life story and the meaningful experiences he's had throughout his journey. He has a unique perspective on healthcare and humanity, and I think it will be impactful to you as well. Enjoy my conversation with Arun Singh. Well, Arun, welcome to the Humans in Healthcare podcast. Thank you for being a part of the show.
Thanks for having me.
Your memoir is a beautiful book. As I read it, I experienced a wide range of emotions. It was funny. I laughed out loud reading parts of it. It was very sad in places. It was inspiring in other places. It talked about some of the injustices of the world in a way that left me feeling frustrated with humanity. And I greatly appreciated the book, and I'm grateful that you've shared your story with people here in the United States and beyond the country as well.
Well, I'm glad that you read it. This book is about the humanity. This book about a kid with the disability, a kid with the all kind of problems, and it tells you that if you do have a drive, if you have a determination, if you have a wit, and you focus, despite all the obstacles, you have a good chance to be successful. You have to be prepared for failures. There's never be 100% success, but you got to have this drive and determination.
Yeah, that comes through quite clearly in your story. I'd like to start by asking you about your experience as an immigrant to the United States. You were invited by a hospital in Worcester, Massachusetts in the 60s to join their program. Why would a hospital there accept an Indian-trained doctor at that time in the history of our country? What were you brought there to do?
Well, first of all, it was interesting. I was looking for a job in the United States because I had no job. I needed to support my family. I needed to get better educated, better trained. And the best place at that time in the world was the United States. And one of my professors had just visited here, and he is the one who recommended to come to the United States. So when I took the exam and I passed it, I never left my home to any big city. So what was the reason the Worcester was offering job? Because of the Vietnam War, because of a lot of residents were drafted in the Vietnam, there was shortage of doctors. In order to have the hospital function, you needed the manpower. And the manpower those days, we didn't have the manpower like a physician assistants we have now, nurse practitioner. So the residents and the interns did all the legwork for the hospital. Now, when I came to Worcester, one of the reasons I came to Worcester because they offered me a passage money. I didn't have money, so they were willing to pay for my plane fare and also room and board. I came to this country with only $5, Mr. Lincoln in my pocket. That was the only money I had. So when I came here, I wanted to get, it was very good that I got accustomed right away to the place. But 60 was different in this country. The Vietnam War was, Tet action was in the full bloom. Country was in the turmoil. There was a political evil. Drugs were rampant. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. And the summer of the love was going. And there was racial violence all around in the country. So the country was absolutely divided at that point in time. When I came here, I was shell-shocked. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't expect this thing. I heard about this problem, but I had not firsthand experienced it. When I came here after a few months in the Worcester, I realized that this is a place they're using as a indentured servitude. We were just doing the work. We were never able to talk to surgeons or surgeons able to teach us. And even they offered me a job to stay there 4 years to finish my training, I realized this was not the place I want to be here because this is not the place I'm going to learn anything.
At the time that you accepted the position to come, what did you think they were hiring you to do?
Well, I expected that part of these works, which I was supposed to do, I was doing it, but I also expected it to be tutored. Tutoring means be taught to see what they're doing. The attitude of the surgeons were at that point was we are there to provide the service, not to learn, not to be educated. When I confronted them and I said, I came all the way 10,000 miles to learn and I'm not learning, sir. Could you recommend me to a university hospital? And the answer was, the University Hospital for American Graduates is not for you.
Yeah, that's really tough to have to hear.
And I was only 22 year old. And I don't know why, if I had to ask that question today, probably I won't ask that. But I did. I don't know what happened to my mind at the point. I said, I'm going to confront that question. And that was shocking to me. And I made the decision that day that I am not going to be here to be indentured servant and not learn anything. When I was in Worcester, yes, we faced a lot of, there was an all-white community, very few, they were not used to an Asian or Indians or even there were a lot of immigrants around there in the hospital, mostly from Iran, Taiwan, and some from Pakistan and other areas. But many of the people were not familiar with what the Indians look like. They all have the idea. They look like a half-naked Gandhi, like ascetics. We are snake charmer, run around on top of the elephant, slept in the basement of Taj Mahal, things like that. So there was a cultural shock to them and also to me. It was ignorant, but that's the way it was. They were not aware what we look like. Many of them people asked me, are you a Cuban? Are you a Caribbean? Are you black? They were used to some of our Indian accent, but many of them have not heard it personally. They've been used to be parroted in the movie and sitcoms, but not in the personally dealing one-to-one.
Yeah, you described that in your book somewhat, and I'll just read a quote that really stood out to me about that. And you say, and you're reflecting on your career a little here, you say, a surgeon such as me would have grown up in an upscale suburb, say in Westchester, Fairfield, or Marin County, and my life would have been a direct ascent to success from the time I was getting straight A's at an exclusive private school. When I was starting out, surgeons didn't look like me either. Shouldn't I have been a 6-foot tall Caucasian male with perfect teeth?
That's right.
So it's quite an unlikely journey that you experienced.
It was a different time, in the 60s. All of these surgeons, the premier positions in a cardiac surgery or major vascular surgery or major surgeons, they were all white Americans. There were very few, one or two, the women even. the American woman. There were very few minorities, American minority in terms of the Afro-Americans or Black people.
Yeah.
And for the Indian, Asian immigrants, it was very, very tough. The people who, even the immigrants, has a better chance is the people who came from the European descent than the Asians. We look different, and culturally we were different. So we had a much lower opportunity to get any job or any of those things.
And as you think about that time now, how did Americans in general view foreigners taking jobs in the U.S. in the 60s and 70s?
Well, they felt very suspicious, but they had no choice because they needed some people to do it. Many people thought that we came here to take their job away, took their position away, and they felt about suspicious and nefarious character behaviors. We were looked down. We're not equal opportunity. There was no equity or equality. There was not opportunity given to us. Say, look, this is the same opportunity given to the native or local American boys or versus the immigrants. We were always had the opportunity lower.
Yeah. And so it's the mindset of immigrants are for jobs that Americans don't want to do, which tend to be what might be perceived as dirtier jobs or.
Well, the Americans did also the dirtier job. No, I wouldn't say that they did not, but it was a part of our training. But again, they got the opportunity to perform, opportunity to assist in the surgery. When came to a complicated operation or a bigger operation or something, a nice operation, we will be asked gently, you maybe not intentional, maybe it was just whatever you want to call, was told, would you mind that this gentleman helps me in this operation? Jim helps me in the operation here. I didn't realize in the beginning, why they asking. One of the reasons was they wanted the local boys or local guys to get better experience than we would. I didn't realize in the beginning. I said, okay, no problem. I'll watch it, whether you guys are doing it. But that's the way subtle. There was a subtle, you feel, a discrimination. Some of them were not intentional. Some of them were intentional.
And ultimately, that wasn't something that you were willing to accept. And maybe one example is what happened there at that hospital in Worcester. You were offered a position, but somehow you declined it and ended up at Columbia. How did that come to pass?
Many things in life, you could do a lot of things. It also depends on your luck. You have to be fortunate. I was fortunate. When I turned down the job in Worcester at that point, first of all, the hospital had advantage on us. They have to sponsor us to be here, which we call J1 visa. The hospital says that you are not employed anymore, then you have 3 months to leave the country.
And was this a work visa or an education visa?
Educational visa.
It's
J1
an educational visa.
Exchange visitor, called exchange visitor those days, that you come in and get the education. If you want to go back or if you want to stay here, you can apply for immigration, etc.
So if your education ends, then you're no longer able to stay in the country.
Or you can apply for the visa, immigrate, but you can. So hospital had the upper advantage on us. So when I refused the job at Worcester, I had no job, but I was determined that I'm not going to do this kind of job until I learned. I almost took a job at the pathology at Dartmouth, Mary Hitchcock, and I had not signed the contract there. I said, my surgical career was over at that point in time. I said, I'm not going to be a surgeon because I can't get the job. I applied many places. Every place they turned it down, including the hospital. I'm there and practiced for 41 years, Rhode Island Hospital. They turned it down me in 1966, 67, that there's no job for immigrants, foreign medical graduates and immigrants. I was turned down, and there where I practiced, and I did more than 15,000 open heart surgery, more than anybody in north to the Mason-Dixon line. And that was the place they turned me down. I wanted to prove that they were wrong. And you may call, I have a chip on my shoulder or whatever you want to call, but I wanted to make sure. I was like a Tom Brady. I want to make sure I was a 6th-round draft, but I'm going to win this thing. So anyway, so how did I end up at New York? In the month of May, there was a big draft, and a lot of residents with the Columbia were drafted at the Vietnam, and suddenly they had a position opening up. A friend of mine called Aaron, if you haven't found a job, there's some openings in New York suddenly come up, and the program starts in July, so only 6 months, only 6 weeks left for them to hire it. So they didn't have anybody, and they needed a manpower. So I went down the interview, and they offered me a job on the spot, and I took it. And when I got in New York, that was cell shock to me, because here I saw a completely different society. Here, Worcester was mostly Caucasian, and my part of rotation in New York, if you ever been to a Harlem area, Columbia had a 3 hospitals, Delafield, Presbyterian, and Harlem, and you have to work all 3 hospitals. They don't know which one you start. My rotation started at Harlem first. What I'd had to deal with, I was totally frustrated, because here I'm alone here in this country. Different culture, different society, different religion, different looks. Everything is different. I don't know anybody in this country. I had no support system. I had no psychologist or psychiatrist to help me. And here I come suddenly from Worcester, which is 99% of Caucasian, to come to a Harlem hospital suddenly, nothing bad about it, entire different culture. And the first day when I was on call, 8 patients came in with a gunshot wound and a stab wound. I never saw that many patients with the blood coming out from the chest, and the whole clothes were filled with the blood, tied down, chained to the bed, or handcuffed to the bed, and the cops are following them with a gun. I thought I was in a war zone, and I was cell shocked. But after a day or two, it continued to have the same thing. It was very, very disturbing to me. I couldn't sleep in my room, because every time I try to go to sleep in the night, I hear all the noise, sirens, and a loud noise. At first, I thought there was a riot going on. When I looked through the window, there were heavily contested basketball going on the street, But at that point in time, when I was there at the Columbia, and I couldn't do a surgery. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. And my hand was very weak. I was 120 pounds, 5'8", and I'm dealing with 220, 250-pound people, 6'3". I couldn't lift them. I couldn't do it. I couldn't cut them. So it looked like I was totally failure here, psychologically, emotionally, physically. And at that point in time, I again thought about it, that I'm in the wrong business. And maybe I should leave this country. This is not for me. Maybe I should try to go to England or Canada or something else. This is not.
Yeah, the idea of doubt seems like a very likely outcome here. In fact, giving up seems like a likely outcome. You are a stranger in a strange land. You don't look like the other people that you're around. You don't have the cultural background. And no one is there saying, you can do it, keep going. You have no cheerleader.
Though we had no support system.
So where does that come from for you?
What it came from me was early in my childhood. The 2 things came from it. When I had terrible injury to my right hand, and I had entirely, my right hand was mangled, end up a brandy wine type of stick in my hand, a paralysis of hand. I couldn't do it. I was educated as a kid. My mom, I missed all the grammar school, nursery schools, in the lower schools. I was educated by mom, who only had 10th grade education. And there was a point in my life as a child that my hand would remain like this, like a hockey stick. And I was not able to extend it. And I had already had this treatment for 4 years. And the only thing I could do is to a little bit pick up a piece of paper or things like that. At that point in time, when I went to a doctor last time, I remember very well with my parents, my dad was sitting there with mom, and the doctor said, well, we've done everything we can with this young man. We have done it. We can't do any more procedure. He's already 4 years passed by, and I had every disease in mankind as a kid, because we didn't have a lot of money, and we lived in private society in a really poor area. So I had a very bad case of hepatitis, asthma, chicken pox, and things like that. So the doctor said he cannot have any more procedure. At that point in time, my dad got really angry, and to me and to the doctor, you mean to say my eldest son is going to be beggar in the family? I realized at that moment what the beggar looks like. I've seen the beggar in India, broken pan, tin can, standing on knocking the door, standing on the street, crying, laying there, looking for a piece of penny or a piece of bread. When I realized my life is going to be like that, that was more painful than my broken heart. I started crying. I could not be consoled. At that point, what most mothers do, my mother picked me up, yelled to my dad. He says, by your yelling and screaming, it's not make him better. And she grabbed me up, held me tight. He said, get up and look up and don't give up. I will work with you. And she made the decision. Next morning, he said to the doctor, I want him to fix his hand. And the next morning, I went to the hospital again. This time, he said, well, he can't have anesthesia. Without anesthesia, he took me down.
Why couldn't you have anesthesia at that time?
Because I had a liver was not working very well. All the anesthesia had a bad reaction.
At that point, you had several surgeries on.
Yes,
on
already
your,
had.
And they had not been effective on your arm.
And that was the last chance. He said, I'll give you to try to fix it. And so I go next day, 4 strong, instead of a painkiller, I got 4 strong guys sitting on my leg, grabbing my hand, sitting on my chest, holding my face. And the surgeon grabbed my elbow with assistant and he gave a signal. And next thing, he broke my hand like a bamboo stick. I hear the snap. And let me tell you, I had so much pain. And I screamed. My voice turned across the room all the way to Taj Mahal. 600 miles went up there. And that pain and agony stayed with me for many, many years, and fearful and rest of my until I was 30s.
It's so vivid to think that the pain would cause your reaction to be so strong that
I had a nightmare for many, many years till I was mid-age. In the 40s, I would think about that. I will have nightmares, and it's
truly traumatic experience.
Yeah, it was a very traumatic experience. So that was one experience I had in my life as young.
Just to reflect on that, most people in America, so therefore most of our listeners, would never have the possibility of imagining experiencing something like that. And what a incredibly challenging, difficult set of circumstances that must have been like to go through. And then to think that now you've got to recover. Your mother was instrumental in recovering from that too.
After the hand was set and the cast was removed, so now I have the bone up aligned pretty well, but I needed a rehab. There's no rehab in India. There was no ultrasound. There was no elastic band. There was no weightlifting. This is, we're talking in 50s. There was no ice machine. There was no packing. This is a small town in a village. It's in a ghetto. Even in this country, small town didn't have the rehab.
I think you wrote in your book that the only ice that could be found in your town was in the morgue to keep bodies from decomposing.
That's right. And they were lucky, that one. And one of the reasons they dispose the body right away because they don't have the ice. So my mom, with the help of a doctor, they came up the idea that she would start putting bricks in the bag and she will tie on my hand and she will follow and ask me to walk. I will walk dragging the brick in my hand on my back of the hand on the street, crying, screaming, painful. Just like a slave in a penal colony, inmate in penal colony. I was walking around, but I had no choice. And sometimes he'll grab me up. I'll hold the window on the bar and hanging down there to grip. Slowly, my hand got better. So that's what my positive attitude came up. My mom gave me a very strong, she was a very smart lady. She had a very sociable, had a quick wit. And so all of this positive thing came from my mom, that don't give up.
And what she said to you was, get up, look up, don't give up.
That's right. That's right.
How did that theme come into play when you were, expected to be an indentured servant, expected to fail at orthopedic surgery, et cetera?
I was not sure that this will work here. But what happened with this background, when I was in New York and Harlem, and when I seen this kind of a culture, and I was shocked, and I wasn't sure. And many of my friends, colleagues, residents, they end up in psychiatric hospital. Many of them left, and many went to Vietnam. So when they came back, I saw them. They're coming from Vietnam. Even they were not with me, but I saw them. They didn't look like normal. So what I said to myself, this is not my place. So how did I do that? I was ready to leave New York. And I said, well, I'm going to go to New York, to Canada or London. I will start looking a job because this is not for me. I can't do it. I just, technically, I can't do it. Physically, I can't do it. Emotionally, I can't do it. This is not culturally, I can't do it. This is not for me. And I had nobody to support me. Aaron, please do this or get a psychiatric therapy. So what I do, decide to say, well, before I leave and I didn't want to go back to India because if I go back to India, I will be considered as a failure. I didn't want to look at my family and friends and everybody say, hey, you went there, this idiot coming back, he's a failure. So I wanted to look at other places. I said, before I leave and leave the United States, I need to look two things in New York City. And the two important things I wanted to see, not the Empire State Building, I wanted to go see the UNO building, United Nations building, and the Statue of Liberty. First, I went to UNO and I saw that, the big rotunda and all the flags, I remember. It was okay, it wasn't very. Then I went to take a tour of the Statue of Liberty. And let me tell you, when I took a tour of the Statue of Liberty, because that time the renovation was going on and it was the most wonderful ever thing I did in the United States. And I would recommend to every young man to go and see it if you want to see it. So when I took the tour and the guide was telling me how the immigrants came in the Ellis Island, how they were kept there, these huddled masses coming from Europe, the 19th and early 20th century, Italians, the Irish, and the Eastern European Jews. You could consider they came in, they endured a more bad environment. They didn't speak English, and yet they had this drive. They were hopeful that America has the opportunity for them. And I heard about all the stories of the immigrants over there. And when I went to the Statue of Liberty and I saw that the statue, and I remember it very well, the new Colossus, the Emma Leger's line, give me your tired, your poor, and your huddled masses. And the lines originated in my ear. I left my lamp beside the golden door. So when I left the Statue of Liberty and I suddenly saw we were on the deck and I saw that the shadow of the Statue of Liberty beacon coming down right on the boat, as the boat was gliding out, I remember the scene, coming to the harbor, close to New York harbor, you see the looming skyline was getting bigger and bigger. And I said to myself, these people came as scared as I was, even though I came to JFK airport, not to the Ellis Island. But they have similar common things with them and me. They made it. They stayed here, and many of them were disappointed they had to go back. Here, I was not thrown out of the country. I'm here. I can speak a language. I have a job. Many of them, they didn't have a job even. They were much more tougher shape than I was. If they can make it, I can make it. So that tour, really, Statue of Liberty, encouraged me. And I began my American journey that day. I said, if they could do it, I could do it.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that story. And what year did that happen, Arun?
That was in 1967.
1967. So you'd been here for a short while at that point. It had been a tough experience. You were on the fence as to whether to stay, and then seeing that, knowing that you weren't actually alone. Yeah, I mean that's what comes through for me, is you weren't actually alone. Others had done this.
Yeah, the others have done it, and they were much more tougher shape than I was. Even though I was scared as much as they were, I went through the same thing, a different period. But I had a job. I had a place to sleep. I couldn't do it, but I had the place to sleep. They didn't have a job. They didn't have the place to sleep. They were in a cell. They were huddled masses. There were like 50 of them laying in the room. When I saw that, that really enlightened me.
One of the things that struck me about your life journey is how much of it seemed to flow from relationships that you developed along the way. The decision for becoming a doctor came from discussions and experiences with a grandfather and other people in your life. Then the decision to go to America was influenced by a friend,
professor, yeah,
a professor, yeah. And then the decision to pursue cardiac surgery also came from a series of connections that you made along the way. Can you talk about what the importance of relationships in influencing your career decisions were?
Well, mentorship is very important, what you call a guidance. The reason I became a doctor, because that's the only profession I knew, because most of childhood I was sick. I was going constantly in the hospital, and I was never exposed to anything else. My paternal and the maternal, both grandparents were physicians, but I never had dealing with them because my dad had married my mom without the permission of my grandfather, so we were ostracized from the family. So I had felt the discrimination at a very early age, that we were never part of it. I never saw my picture of grandfather. I never saw him. I never met him, except I knew he was a surgeon. And he was a pretty good surgeon, I heard, but I never met him. My maternal grandfather was also a good surgeon, but my relationship with him was not very good because I exposed his infidelity at a very early age. And so he disowned me. So we had no connection. How did I get to the cardiac surgery? Again, I could not do the orthopedic. I could not do any other surgery. I didn't like the general surgery. And I liked the idea I was able to watch in a heart surgery at New York, at Columbia. Even I wanted to be assistant there, but the opportunity wasn't there. So I was able to watch it, but when I watched it, I really enjoyed it, and I saw the performance, and I said to myself, maybe I will become a heart surgeon. But getting a position to get trained was very difficult. There were 500 people looking for 50 jobs. So you can imagine most of them American kids, 6 foot tall, white, Caucasian, perfect teeth, look like a snowfall from the Maine, Westchester County, Marion County, and Fairfield County, the all East Coast, not the West Coast. And so those were the people who were getting it. And even I had a good credential, at the end, I did not get a position. Till the last second, one of my professors, who was very close to me, and he asked me, what are you doing? I said, I don't have a job. I like to do it. And he got on the line, and luckily, again, the luck plays part. Thank God that there was a position. They were just starting an opening at the Brown Rhode Island Hospital where I practiced, and they were opening up in a month, and he had a connection, and he called and recommended it, and I got my position that way. And I got trained there, and then I had opportunity to go to London, which was the best pediatric children's hospital in the world, the oldest hospital for sick children. And again, I started in a very bottom position, and they liked me very much. I was not lazy, I'll be honest with you. I was a very hardworking guy. And so they appreciated my talent, and they liked me, and they recommended it. And I came back and returned the job here in Rhode Island. I was there for 41 years practicing. And
one of your first cases there was with a very young patient.
2 days old baby, Jason. 2 days, Jason Daly. I'll never forget that. This is the first baby who had a tetralogy, the blue baby, needed an operation right away. I told the parents the option to go somewhere else, Boston, or do it. They trusted me. They said, no, I want you to do it, and this is what you're going to do. And God is going to help you, and I trust you. You're going to do the best. I performed the surgery. Baby did okay, but had a reaction to another drug, which we had used. We did not know that affected the drug those days, like a new drug. And 2 days later, baby died. I was devastated. I was crying. The most disturbing part was, here's a mom handed me a live baby to me in my lap and said, take care of, I trust you. And 3 days later, I'm handing a dead baby corpse to mom. I could not forget that scene. And that haunted me for the rest of my life.
You describe it, and it's a very poignant description of you. You said that it must have been unprofessional, but as you brought the child, the tears were streaming down your face, which was a very human reaction. It seems like to me, as a non-medical professional, the only possible reaction to have.
So I have tears now in my eyes when I think about it, when you bring it. So that was very emotional. I wasn't sure I was going to do this thing again. But many of my friends, including my wife, they said, this is what you train. This is what you want to do. This is best. Keep doing it. Keep doing it.
You describe in the book about how it kept going through your mind what you could have done differently and how you could have made a different decision. We recently had on the podcast a researcher named Dr. Sue Scott, who studies this concept of the second victim, where when a medical incident happens, you have what you think of as the first victim, which in this case is Jason. And no one thinks about the second victim. Everyone's concerned about Jason and Jason's parents, but no one thinks about the second victim, which in this case was you. You're the person who experienced the other side of that. You had the hands that ultimately were involved in the last moments of Jason's life. And she writes about in her research about how important it is for people to care for those who were part of that incident. What was that like for you in getting support from people around you? Or?
There was not those days available. Nowadays, yes, we have a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and a colleague to help. These were early days of cardiac surgery, heart surgery. So this kind of help was not. I think these kind of help are very important and emotionally supporting, because that can put you in a deep end. You could career. And I was at the end, deep end. I wasn't sure I want to do another one because my confidence was lost. But I continued to do, and over the years, I had performed many, many operations.
How many do you think, I know you don't keep a scorecard, but generally speaking, about how many heart surgeries do you think you've performed at this point?
The hospital record, yes, they do keep a scorecard. I was involved with 20,000 open heart surgery. Personally, I had performed 15,160 or 61.
Wow.
Okay,
that's
and a 5,000 assisted. So out of many of operations I performed from 1 day to 99, many of the patients lived. I wish everyone had lived, but the bottom line, that's not the reality. Those who did not live, we carry the pain and suffering of the family and the patient right in our heart. One of the patients I remember very well was Sean. Sean was a young kid who was a baby who was born with the 3-chamber heart, and I performed the operation, and palliative operation, and he kept coming in the hospital every couple of months. After when he was 3, he was beautiful, handsome, good looking, blue eye, blonde, and very caring and very personal. He was much more close to me than even my child, because I was spending more time. He was always following me. Dr. Singh, what are you doing? What are you doing? And eventually, Son was failing when he was 40-year-old, and I wanted him to have the best option to live longer. I wanted to send him the best place, and I made an arrangement to send him to Alabama to have a surgery. Before he went there, with the help of his mother, he drew a coloring book, "Please Make My Heart Better." And all the experience of the kid drawing the blood and etc. So I made the arrangements. He went there. He handed me the book. And the last page was, "I'll see you later," raising the hand, and blew a kiss. A few days later, I was sitting in the office. I got a phone call from a surgeon at the Alabama, which was the best hospital at that time. We did everything possible. Son did not live and died. I was devastated. I grabbed the book, clenched on my chest, and cried and cried and cried. Then I realized, I said to myself, how much poor kid and his family had endured the pain and suffering and all of these things. I wondered, obliquely I pondered the life, the nature, how prematurely this kid was taken out of the earth. And it bothered me a lot. I did not want to have another child to suffer, this kind of problem. Who to say the next child is born is not going to have this problem? Who to say my child was born or not? We were parents of 2 normal kids, and we were planning to have a third one. I talked that to my wife. I said, we can't have a third child. The emotion was so strong. When we do a surgery, people say, Are you emotionally involved? Of course. I'm not indifferent to the patient's suffering. Then I do have a blood goes through my vein. I do have a heart. That doesn't mean that I don't have emotion. But you have to control the emotion. Otherwise, emotion will control you. So when you do this kind of work, you have. But this was a one incident, the emotion control over me. We decided not to have any more child because of what I see to saw. It really bothered me. And that book never left my desk for 41 years. And I still have the book here in my desk here. The song reminded me. So I had operated a patient with the AIDS, uninsured, terminal patients, where everybody refused it. And I believe it as a medical profession. We went as to provide the service. I'm not there to judge why you're in welfare, why you have AIDS. I'm there to help you.
Yeah. And that reminds me of another passage of your book that really struck me. And it's another situation that most Americans can't even imagine. But I'd like to read you the passage and get you to react to it. So you were describing your medical training in India, where you are now interacting with patients in the hospital and taking care of them. Right. You say that just outside the hospital doors, garbage was piled high and stray dogs and pigs could often be seen gnawing on discarded bandages. The place had all the charm of a POW camp. The building was painted a sickly yellow, and there were blacked out windows, a corrugated tin roof, and what looked like a guard tower nearby. It was actually a water tower. Inside, it was even worse. A dedicated staff struggled to take care of an indigent population living in unsanitary, crowded conditions and afflicted with diseases that had already been eradicated in the West. We had cases of tuberculosis, leprosy, polio, and rabies, ghastly ailments that swept through the city slums and deposited their victims into our casualty room, which was what we called our emergency room. Along a lengthy corridor flanked by two walkways, patients, often accompanied by their families, lay on filthy cots or on the floors, which ran with human effluent. The very air reeked of sickness and misery. And then you said that this would not be shocking to someone who grew up in India. You said this is the world we lived in. Even those of us whose families had managed to stay just above the poverty line were still in close proximity to homelessness, disease, and filth. And you went on to say that what upset you most was not the squalor, but the injustice of it all. And can you comment how that shaped you and influenced you here in the U.S. as well?
Well, yes, it did help me, because what I saw there, the suffering. Personally, I went as a kid. So, and I grew up in a small area, which I grew up in poverty. I walked the bare street, I walked in dirty water, I bathed in dirty water, drank it as a kid. I shared the street with the donkeys and the cows and the monkeys and snakes and my friends died very young age, chicken pox, blind and all. So I had seen that suffering. And I personally believe we became a doctor. Our job is to take care of the humanity. You got to provide the service. I'm not there to judge you why you are a poor or why you're divorced or why you're in welfare or why you're LBGT, whatever the reason is, or why you have AIDS. My job to provide. And I strongly believe, regardless of your social status, financial status, everybody deserves a better care. It's a right to provide. And I would never deny anybody who had insurance or non-insurance or anything to not provide the care. Absolutely not. They will get the same care which I would give to others.
It also occurs to me that your experience with those types of extreme conditions cultivates a compassion that may exceed what those who haven't seen that level of suffering have experienced. And it also makes me think of the many other immigrant healthcare professionals that come to the U.S. Even now. Many doctors come still as immigrants. Many nurses come as immigrants as well. You talked about mentorship. Have you seen that this contributes in a way that you can contribute, mentor native born towards more compassionate types of care?
Yes, of course. As a part of our medical students, when we're teaching, one of the things which we do is we try to tell them these are humans. You got to listen to them. See, one of the things that are happening, and medicine has advanced quite rapidly and has got a high tech and high, but the human aspect, we are losing it out. We can treat them. We know the medicine, we can do the surgery, robotic, the high technology, but there's no substitute for the human aspect. You got to hold the patient's hand. You got to put a hand on his shoulder, ask him, how's the family? What can I do? What is you ate? What is your life like? It makes them confidence. And that's very, very, it's not only providing the medicine or surgery, it's the human aspects. Medicine is art and science both. You got to combine it to be successful. And I think it's very important. The pendulum has swung too far left. We need to have the human aspect at all. But the other aspect is that along the way, people ask me, is America a racist? Is this a racist country?
It's very, very top of the American psyche right now.
People ask me, how did I feel? Yes, let me tell you what I feel about the America. I've been here more than as now I'm American citizen. America is not a racist country. America is a land which blessed with the founding documents, founding principles, and the founding values. And if we see something flaw in our system, that's the only country you can raise your hand and you can voice. Again, tell me any country, China, Russia, India, any country in the world. There's no other country. Does race plays a part? Yes, race is a fact. It does play part. It is a part of our system. But tell me in the civilization, when is the race is not being played? Look back 2,000 years ago. In this country in 1920, the English hated the Germans, the Irish hated the Italians, and everybody hated the Jews. And American hated it in the beginning. American hates the immigrants, but then they resisted. And then they give up. They can't. They like it. So the race has always been there. And what I try to tell, did I have any feeling? Yes, people felt about it. They looked to me as suspicious. Many times I was not part of his system because I was not look like them. Many times I was there. They thought I was a servant. They handed me a $5 tip, when I was handing a professor as a courtesy, towel courtesy. So what I'm just saying is that that's a cultural thing, and we need to educate. Now, you can look at that. When these things happen, what do I do? How do I react it? I reacted, I laughed it up. I never got, I don't want to get anger. I didn't want to take on anger. I want to get even. I don't want to take on anger. I want to get even by performance, by an achievement. I want to get equal, beat you up by that, not by getting anger on anger. Don't want to be angered, because that's not. If you go on a negativity, you're going to drown yourself in self-pity, and you're not going to make it. Now, how things have changed, if you look back the history of this country, post Jim Crow, I hear lately a lot of Jim Crow, everybody talking about Jim Crow, the thing has changed after post Jim Crow because after that is a combination of a hardworking, good luck, discipline in face of a discrimination and the disappointment and also with the explicit and implicit bias. What has changed is now the Black who lives in America suddenly realizes that if it points out the consternation and concern living in the white society is they've been discriminated, and what is happening now is thanks to social media, which has exposed all these problems. It's a reputable evidence that yes, the Blacks are the people with the LBG society or sex or gender, poor socioeconomic status have been discriminated. And the people are becoming aware. If you notice that the Black Lives Matters, more white people walking around in the Black Lives Matters than the black ones. You know what I mean? In the protests. Why is that? When justice is served, when people are unaffected are raised as much as the people are affected. So I think the changes are occurring and change will occur. America is a new country. It's not 1,000 years old. We're learning. It's imagination and our democracy is a challenge. Look at that changes happen. 150 years ago, the blacks were not part of slavery was there. 150 years later, we Afro-American became a president. Mr. Obama. Think about it. Now, 60 years ago, I came to this country. Their children are vice presidents and the governors. And 50 years ago, when I was in my hospital, I was the only Indian walking around. Now, if you go down to any hospital anywhere in the United States, the Asians, the women, the minorities will be looking after you very likely. They are there to take. So change is occurring, and we are occurring. And to people, I want to warn them, yes, this is your country. You're born here. This is your homeland. This is what you call, this is your home. But the people, those who came far and ever, people like me, people like who came far and not born here, this is our adopted home. The most important, this is my promised land. America is a promised land, and that's what we hear.
Well, that's very wise to hear you describe that. And as I hear you talk, it makes me think of you as a pioneer, given the timing of the country where you came in and you found a way and made a way there and set an example for others to follow.
Well, I try to do, remember, this country is built on immigrants. You know, not only we don't welcome the immigrants, this is a country of immigrants. This is our core value. This is our motto, is say e pluribus unum. This is our oldest tradition, 200 years old, more than that. This is what America is. So you can't say that, you know, yes, we should have law and order. I'm not denying all of these things, but you can't say categorically immigrants are not good. Yes, it is your country. This is your homeland. But more important, this is my promised land.
Yeah, well said. One last question for you. The night before you left India, you had a conversation with your maternal grandfather. You referenced having a strained relationship with him, and he told you that you don't understand the human heart. I found it somewhat ironic that in some ways, you became a practitioner of managing the human heart as a surgeon, but that's not what he meant. I wonder if you think he was right at that time?
Yes.
And how you would gauge your understanding today? Well,
it's very, very interesting. You know, many things happen as the time you grow and you think about what is true today, Nathan, may not be true tomorrow. You know, because you mature and you think retrospectively and etc. And I'll give you two examples. First, you ask my grandfather. I'm going to tell you very quickly. I didn't understand because I exposed his infidelity.
You told your grandmother about infidelity.
And the relationship, and because it was protected and all other. But then I look at that, there was nothing common except they were married and she was a housewife and they're taking care.
And you mentioned in the book it was an arranged marriage. They didn't know each other before, so...
Yeah, and he had the kids. My grandfather was very highly educated. He was educated in Oxford. He was a very prominent surgeon. He drank scotch, wore a bow tie. He was very, very sophisticated. On the grandmother was a housewife, village type, and she had no. So after that, you had kids and all, there was nothing common to their share with them. You know what I mean? When they grew up, there was nothing common that was sit down and talk. He read the book. He wanted to follow, literatures and drama. My grandmother had no interest. So yes, he said, you will never understand why it happened. And he pointed out he lent me money to come to because the Rooster City Hospital didn't give me money as they backed out. But he also told me, this is a loan. Must you pay the money? And I did return the money, my paycheck. So that was it. And the second question I'm going to answer you that when I was begging a job at Rhode Island Hospital at Brown University, after 2 years, I said, there's no job. And Dr. Randall said, you go to Mississippi, go in the South big city. He was the chief of surgery, etc. He said, get lost. There's no place here. How are you going to make it when Italian and Jews in this hospital did not survive, did not make it? They're American, they're born here, they went to school. How with your color and your skin and your foreign graduate, you're going to do it? At that time, I thought he was a racist. But later on, I realized he saw my talent and he was trying to protect me, saying that if I'm here, I'll be destroyed. Go somewhere you have better opportunity than here. But I proved him wrong. He realized. And I don't feel that he was racist. But at that time, I did.
How do you counsel people who are young and smart and principled like you were at that time that your grandfather gave you that caution? How do you counsel people who want to develop an understanding of the human heart, who may be already technically smart, but maybe just don't understand that?
Well, one of the things, the human aspect of the humanity is very important. Talk to the people. Talk to your level. Don't look like down. Talk to what the life is like. What is a family like? As I said, medicine is not only providing its pills or doing a surgery. It's art. You want to be a healer. And the only way you can heal is to know them, get to know them. If you don't do it, you're not going to do it. And I also tell, believe in yourself. See what you can do. See invisible. You can see through invisible. See what you want and believe in yourself. You may fail many times. Have determination, have the gut, have the drive, have the wit. You will overcome the obstacle. Here's a kid from India. It's not the same culture, different color. All the problem, all the disability, dyslexia, blind in eye, paralyzed hand, couldn't hold a piece of paper, $5. First night I slept with a quarter. Here I am, perform more surgery than anybody else in north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Well, thank you, Arun. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And the book is Your Heart, My Hands. Thank you so much for giving it to us.
The book is very inspirational. It's not because of my book. It is a book for anybody, not only the patients, anybody who is interested in humanity or spirituality and believe himself should read it. I encourage.
As a very recent reader of your book, I would say all of that is very true, and I highly recommend it. So thank you for being with us and sharing your story today.
Take care. Take care very much. I appreciate having you.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on your preferred podcast platform. And if you'd like to learn more, please visit humansinhealthcare.show. Humans in Healthcare is brought to you by Shearwater Health, a global healthcare company based in Nashville, Tennessee, that expands the size and impact of clinical teams for healthcare organizations. You can learn more about Shearwater Health at our website, swhealth.com.